The bell rang throughout the Starlight Diner as Sarah Williams pushed open the door to enter her evening shift. The aroma of freshly baked cakes and roasted coffee entered her nose, a familiar scent after 5 years of serving here. Bright neon lights reflect on the black and white tiled floor, creating a nostalgic atmosphere typical of a 50s diner. But tonight, there is something different in the air. Sarah ran her hand through her curly black hair, which was neatly tied into a bun, and checked her pastel uniform again in the mirror. Her shiny brown skin stood out under the fluorescent lights. Her dark brown eyes were filled with fatigue after a long day of taking care of her sick mother. But Sarah had no choice. With rising medical costs and student loans still weighing her down, she needed every penny of tip money she could get. "Sarah, your area tonight is the window table." Jerry, the evening manager, called across the bar. His voice sounded more tense than usual, and Sarah noticed that her colleagues were also whispering about something. "And remember to be careful with table number 7. It's a VIP." Sarah nodded, tied her apron around her waist, and took out her familiar notebook. She is used to serving all kinds of customers, from local families to visiting celebrities. But something about the way Jerry emphasized the word VIP made her feel uneasy. The whispering in the kitchen became clearer and clearer. "It's Jason Statham, I swear to God," whispered a chef. "He was filming a new movie here and stopped by for dinner." Sarah felt her heart beat a little faster, not because of the guest's fame, but because of the stories she had heard about how some stars treated the waitstaff. As Sarah walked towards table number 7, she could feel all eyes in the restaurant on her. In a hidden corner under dim light, Jason Statham sat alone, eyes glued to the menu. There were no bodyguards or entourage, just a man looking for a quiet dinner. "Hello, I'm Sarah, and I'll be serving you tonight," she said, as professionally as possible, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Can I introduce you to the restaurant's special dish?" Jason looked up, and Sarah was surprised by his warm gaze. There was no arrogance or discomfort, just fatigue and perhaps a little loneliness. "Thanks, Sarah. Can you tell me which dish is the best here?" The conversation happened surprisingly naturally. Sarah introduced the grilled ribs special, and Jason listened attentively, occasionally nodding and asking questions. The tense atmosphere gradually disappeared, replaced by a strange feeling of comfort. But then things started to turn around when a group of drunk customers entered the restaurant. They recognized Jason immediately and started making noise, taking pictures and shouting. Sarah could see the discomfort on Jason's face, but he still tried to stay calm. "This!" shouted a drunk man. "Why would a famous actor like you let a—" he used a racist word, "serve him?" Time seemed to freeze. Sarah felt the blood rush to her face, her ears ringing with embarrassment and anger. She was used to racist words, but that didn't make them any less painful. Before anyone could react, Jason stood up. "I'm sorry, but I cannot accept such behavior." His voice was deep and powerful. "Sarah is a professional waitress, and she deserves respect." Jerry, the manager, rushed over, but instead of taking Sarah and Jason's side, he bowed his head and apologized to the group of drunk guests. "We're very sorry for the inconvenience. Sarah, could you please retire to the kitchen?" Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She knew what would happen next. This wouldn't be the first time Jerry sacrificed his staff to please prejudiced guests. Jason stood up and placed a $100 bill on the table. "I don't want to eat in a place that tolerates discrimination," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Sarah, you don't deserve this." The group of drunk guests began to boo. Jerry kept apologizing. But Sarah just stood there, feeling like the world was spinning around her. The smell of food from the kitchen suddenly became strong. The noise was like a tornado in her ears. Sarah swallowed her tears, trying to stay calm. "I beg your pardon." She turned to walk away, but Jason gently touched her shoulder. "Don't let them break your spirit," he said softly. "You deserve better than this." Jerry called out, "Sarah, if you don't return to serve immediately, I will have to fire you." That was the decisive moment. Sarah could feel cold sweat running down her spine, her heart pounding in her chest. She thought about her mother who was sick at home, the bills piling up, and the job she had worked at for the past 5 years. But then, she remembered the words her grandfather taught her since childhood. "Daughter, dignity has no price." Sarah slowly took off her apron, placing it on the bar with shaking but determined hands. "No, Jerry," her voice was clearer and stronger than she expected. "I'm not going back. No one deserves to endure this kind of treatment." The whispers in the restaurant grew louder and louder. Some diners started to stand up. Their phones were raised to record the whole incident. Sarah could feel this moment would change her life forever. Jason smiled appreciatively, and in his eyes, Sarah saw sincere respect. "Sometimes," he said, "we have to compromise our safety to protect our dignity." Sarah walked out of the Starlight Diner into the warm Los Angeles night, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years, she felt truly free. The night breeze caressed her cheeks, carrying the scent of plumeria from the nearby park, and Sarah knew she had made the right decision. The phone in her pocket began to vibrate continuously. Social media notifications had begun to spread her story. But tonight, Sarah just wanted to walk home, to feel every step on the sidewalk, to reflect on what had just happened, and to be proud of the woman she had become. It took Sarah nearly an hour to walk back to her small apartment in East Los Angeles. Car horns and music from the bars echoed like a soundtrack to the chaotic thoughts in her head. The phone kept vibrating in her pocket, but she wasn't ready to face the outside world. When I opened the apartment door, the familiar smell of medicine and ginger tea from my mother's room wafted through the air. Sarah's heart sank. How could she tell her mother that she had just lost her job? She was too worried about the cost of her cancer treatment. "You're back already?" Mother's weak voice echoed from the bedroom. "Why are you back so early?" Sarah took a deep breath, smelling the pine scent from the scented candles she lit every night. "I have something to tell you," she replied, entering her mother's room with a heavy heart. Mrs. Rose was sitting with her back against a pile of pillows, an old book on her lap. Under the soft nightlight, her thin face became even more haggard, but her eyes still lit up when she saw her daughter. "What's going on, honey?" Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed, holding her mother's thin hand. She could feel every blue vein under her delicate skin. I just lost my job at Starlight." When Sarah told everything, Mrs. Rose just listened silently. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. "My daughter," she whispered, squeezing Sarah's hand. "You did the right thing. Your father would be very proud." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, looking out at the city lights flashing like distant stars. The sound of traffic on the street has faded away, leaving only the steady creaking of the ceiling fan and my mother's gentle breathing from the next room. She opened her phone and was overwhelmed by the number of notifications. Video of the incident at Starlight has spread throughout social networks. Thousands of comments supported her, sharing similar stories of discrimination they had experienced. But there are also criticisms and toxic comments that make her shudder. One message in particular caught Sarah's attention. It was an email from someone who introduced herself as Michelle Rodriguez, an independent documentary producer. "Your story touched my heart," the email said. "I want to make a documentary about people like you, people who dare to stand up for their dignity. Can we meet?" Sarah read the email over and over again, her heart beating faster with each reading. Part of her wanted to refuse. She had never wanted to be the center of attention. But then she remembered other waiters and waitresses who might be suffering the same things but didn't dare speak up. The sound of coughing from her mother's room brought Sarah back to reality. Tomorrow she will have to start looking for a new job. Bills wait for no one, and Mom's medicine cannot be delayed. But when Sarah looked in the bathroom mirror, she no longer saw a tired waitress. Instead, there was a strong woman who dared to stand up for what was right. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of her phone ringing. The number was strange, but she still picked up the phone. "Hello, I'm Linda from Jason Statham's office," a professional female voice said. "He wanted to invite you to meet to discuss an opportunity." Sarah stood stunned, her hands trembling as she held the phone. Through the kitchen window, the morning sunlight shines down on her small potted plants, the cacti and aloe vera plants that she has cared for many years. They still survive well in harsh conditions, and maybe she will too. "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I will come." 2 hours later, Sarah stood in front of the high-rise building in Beverly Hills that housed the offices of Jason's film production company. She wore her old suit, the only one she had, a bit faded, but still in decent shape. The smell of cheap perfume she sprayed on her neck could not hide the musty smell from the fabric that had not been dry cleaned for a long time. In the elevator to the 20th floor, Sarah could hear her heart beating. Her reflection in the elevator mirror serves as a reminder of the distance between her world and this world of luxury. But then she remembered the respectful look in Jason's eyes last night, and that gave her courage. The office door opened, and Sarah entered a large space with floor-to-ceiling windows. The smell of expensive coffee and fragrant wood emanates from the luxurious furniture. Jason was standing by the window, turning when she entered. "Sarah," he greeted, smiling. "Thanks for coming. We need to talk about what happened last night and about the future." Sarah tightened her handbag strap, feeling cold sweat run down her spine. This could be the moment that changes her life, but in what direction? She could only hope that her decision to stand up for herself last night would lead her to a better path. Jason's office exudes elegance, but is not ostentatious. The smell of cedar wood from the ceiling-high bookshelves blends with the scent of freshly brewed Arabica coffee. Through the giant glass windows, Sarah could see the whole of Los Angeles stretching out under the clear blue sky of a California morning. "Please sit down," Jason pointed to the leather chair across from his desk. Sarah sat down, feeling the softness of the chair under her old suit. "I saw the video of the incident last night," he continued. "It went viral on social media." Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't mean to cause trouble," she said quietly. "No, you're not causing trouble," Jason said seriously. "You've shown everyone what true courage is, and that's exactly why I invited you here." He stopped and poured 2 cups of coffee. The fragrant scent wafted out, reminding Sarah of mornings at Starlight. "I'm producing a movie about people who dare to stand up against social injustice. Not heroes with superpowers, but ordinary people like you. People who have the courage to say no to wrong things." Sarah felt her heart beat faster. "I don't understand. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to be a part of this project," Jason said, pushing the coffee cup toward her. "Not as an actor, but as an associate producer. We needed people who understood these experiences, who could help us tell the story in the most authentic way." The room seemed to spin around Sarah. She took a sip of coffee, trying to stay calm. The bitter taste on the tip of her tongue helps her concentrate more. I don't have any experience in filmmaking. But you have something more important: real-life experience and an honest perspective. We'll train you on the technical side. Starting salary is $75,000 a year, with full health insurance for you and your mother. That number almost made Sarah choke on her coffee. This amount is 3 times her income at Starlight, and health insurance. That means her mother will get better treatment. But then another thought crossed her mind. "Why me?" Sarah asked, her voice low. "Is it because you feel guilty about last night? Or is this just a PR move?" Jason did not avoid her eyes. In the morning sunlight streaming through the window, Sarah could see the tired wrinkles around his eyes. "I have been in the entertainment industry long enough to see how many stories are buried, how many voices are silenced," he said slowly. "When I saw how she stood up for her dignity, I realized that was a story that needed to be told. Not for PR, not for pity, but because it could inspire others. Others are struggling just like you." Sarah looked down at the cup of coffee in her hand, observing the small ripples on the glossy black surface. She could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of car horns echoing from the street below. In that moment, she remembered all the times she had to endure discriminatory words, contemptuous looks, and toxic comments. "If I accept," Sarah looked up, "I want to tell the stories of all people like me. Not just about racism, but about all forms of discrimination. About those who serve workers endure harassment. Workers are treated unfairly. People are ignored and forgotten." Jason nodded, a small smile appearing on his lips. "That's exactly what we want to do. But there's one thing you need to know. This job won't be easy. You'll have to face naysayers who will try to smear and belittle what we do." "I'm used to it," Sarah replied, her voice stronger. "All my life I've had to deal with the same things." "So, what do you think?" Jason asked, holding out a folder. Sarah looked out the window again. Down there, Los Angeles is starting a new day. Millions of people with their own untold stories. She thought about her mother, about the sleepless nights worrying about bills, about her unfinished dreams when she had to drop out of school midway to go to work. And she thought about little Sarah, who once dreamed of making a change in the world. "When can I start?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with determination. Jason smiled. "Today, if you're ready. We have a lot of work to do." When Sarah signed the contract, she felt as if a new chapter in her life was opening. The ink from the pen flowed smoothly onto the paper, leaving her signature. No longer a waitress, but a film producer, a storyteller. On the way home that afternoon, Sarah stopped at a small flower shop. She bought a bouquet of brilliant tulips, her mother's favorite flower. When she walked into the apartment with a bouquet of flowers in her hand, her mother's tears of happiness were all she needed to know that she had made the right decision. "I did it, Mom," Sarah whispered as she hugged her mother. "We'll be fine." That night, Sarah sat by the window as usual, but this time not to worry about the future. She opened her laptop and started typing. This is a story about people who dare to stand up for what is right. 1 year later, the bright lights of the Dolby Theater shine on Hollywood Boulevard, where hundreds of movie stars are gathering for the premiere of the documentary Voices Unheard. Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her dressing room, unable to believe her reflection. Her elegant black dress hugged her body. Her hair was neatly styled. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged. The smell of luxurious perfume wafts in the air, blending with the scent of new lipstick and high-end foundation. This is a completely different world from her days as a waitress at Starlight, but Sarah hasn't forgotten where she came from. 5 more minutes, an assistant poked his head into the room and announced. Sarah nodded, took a deep breath. She could hear the noise of the crowd outside, the click of cameras, and the sounds of reporters interviewing stars walking down the red carpet. Jason knocked on the door and entered. "Ready?" he asked with his familiar warm smile. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, fiddling with the silver necklace that had been a gift from her mother for a recent birthday. "It doesn't seem real." "It's very real," Jason said, placing his hand on her shoulder. "You have done something extraordinary, Sarah. This film will change the lives of many people." Sarah thought about the past few months. Going from a waitress to a documentary producer was not an easy road. There were nights when she stayed up all night learning about the filmmaking process, and long days interviewing dozens of people with similar stories to hers. Each story is a piece of a larger picture of injustice and discrimination in society. But the most important thing was the change she witnessed. After the video of the incident at Starlight went viral, many restaurants began reviewing their policies. Starlight Diner, under pressure from public opinion, fired Jerry and hired a new manager, an African woman with 15 years of experience in the industry. They have also implemented diversity and inclusion training for all employees. "It's time," Jason reminded. Sarah nodded, stood up and walked out into the hallway. The sound of her high heels echoed on the marble floor, each step bringing her closer to the fateful moment. When the door opened, the flash was as bright as a wall of light. Sarah held Jason's hand tightly as they walked down the red carpet. She could hear reporters calling her name, questions being shouted from all sides. "Sarah, what do you think about the film's impact on the anti-discrimination movement? Is this the beginning of a wave of change in the service industry? What message do you have for people facing similar situations?" Sarah stopped and turned towards the reporters. The smell of expensive perfume and makeup no longer made her feel out of place. Instead, they remind her of her past journey and the new person she has become. "I just want to say one thing," she said, her voice echoing through the sound system. "Never let fear stop you from standing up for what's right. Every voice matters. Every action can make a difference." In the crowd, Sarah saw her mother smiling proudly. She is much better thanks to the new treatment they can afford. Next to her was Michelle Rodriguez, the documentary producer who contacted Sarah that day, who became a close friend and mentor. As they entered the cinema, Sarah felt an unusual sense of peace. The smell of new leather and plush carpeting filled the air, but in her mind, she could still smell the coffee and baked goods from Starlight Diner. That's where it all began, where she found her strength. The lights in the theater gradually dimmed, and the big screen began to light up. The opening music plays, and the first image appears, a small restaurant in the evening, neon lights flashing in the darkness. Sarah held her mother's hand tightly as her voice echoed across the screen. Sometimes, the moments that define our lives aren't the big successes, but the small decisions to stand up for what's right. As the images continue to play out on screen, Sarah learns that her story is not just about a black waitress standing up against discrimination. It is about the power of one voice, about how one courageous act can create ripples of change, and about the hope that the world can become a better, more just place. One person, one story, one courageous moment at a time. And when applause echoed in the theater after the movie ended, Sarah knew her journey had just begun. There are many stories that need to be told, many voices that need to be heard, and she is ready to be the one to tell them. "Thank you," her mother whispered in the darkness of the movie theater, tears sparkling in her old eyes. "You showed everyone that dignity has no price." Sarah smiled and hugged her mother tightly. In that moment, she remembered that fateful night at the Starlight Diner and wondered if the young girl in the waitress uniform ever imagined that her decision to stand up for herself would lead her here. Not only change your life, but also inspire others to do the same. That night, as Los Angeles slept, Sarah stood on the balcony of her new apartment, looking out at the city of dreams. The night wind carried the scent of jasmine from her small garden, and in that moment, she knew that this was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter, not only for her, but for all those who dare to stand up for what they believe in.